All right, so Ben Shapiro has Piers Morgan on his show, and they're going to go over the conversation they had about gun debate back however long when Ben Shapiro was on Piers Morgan's show. And I've watched it. I'm going to rewatch it while doing this. Piers Morgan goes on a certain not rant, but like I guess a mini monologue, and it shows exactly how bad his position is and people who think like him is on this topic. So let's get to it.
So let's talk about your general view of what government ought to do. So what makes you a liberal in sort of not the classical liberal sense where we agree, but the part where we disagree? What do you think government ought to do?
Well, it should be as small as possible, right? I don't believe in massive government, sprawling government agencies with lots of people doing jobs you're not quite sure what they're doing, soaking up public expenditure. I think government should be responsible. It should take action, even if it's against the popular will of the people. You're made to be a government because people expect you to take difficult decisions.
So immediately, right off the bat, before you even get to the gun conversation, he says government should be as small as possible, and immediately follows that with, oh, government should step in even if it's against a popular position. And I can't, off the top of my head, maybe I'll be able to do so at the end of this video, but I can't think of what way of thinking he would have that makes sense to him. If you want small as possible government, why would you want government to step in the situations that you want government to step in, despite it being against the popular opinion and position? And then he says he wants government to be responsible. If the government is small as possible, the responsible part isn't as big isn't as necessary as it needs to be. For example, if government is as small as possible in regards to taxes and which he also mentions expenditures, I'm assuming that's taxes, the tax money immediately is small as possible. Let's say the government is only responsible for, something like the military, and then obviously they have to pay the people who run the offices, who are in the offices. We get rid of something like the United States Post Office, since it's a money, funnel. It just sucks up all the money because it doesn't make any money. How irresponsible can you be? So right there, to me, that idea conflicts on itself. I don't know what people like him are thinking when they have this idea about the government.
Theresa May wasn't. She just wanted to please everybody. I don't believe in people-pleasing governments. I believe you are elected by the people. You should live up as far as possible to the manifesto that you ran on.
He just said he doesn't want a people-pleasing government. But later in the video, we're going to note that, because later in the video, he's going to talk about the government pleasing him. You can't be this self-centered. You can't.
Liberal and conservative.
Take cigarette smoking, right? Most smokers knew it was bad for them, right? They know it's bad, cigarette smoking. But they want the right to smoke, right? It's not a constitutional right, but they want to have the right to smoke. It's my life. Fine, okay, it's your life. But actually what has happened in countries like Britain and America in the last 20 years is you don't now go into a bar and be full of smoke if you don't want it to be. That, to me, seemed to be sensible government. Yes, you are impinging on the right of a civilian to lead the life they want to lead, which is to walk into a bar and have a cigarette at the bar. But actually, if most people in that bar don't want to have a cigarette, why should they be subjected to unhealthy smoke from you in the way that they were being? Now, is that nanny state by government to ban smoking from public places? I would think it was the right thing to do. I'm a non-smoker. I smoke the odd cigar. But most smokers I know actually shrugged their shoulders and kind of accepted it. And there's a kind of template there, I would argue, Mr. Shapiro, for the gun debate.
Okay, so he just used the smoking argument to, I guess, lead his way to the gun debate. The smoking argument is actually goes against, earlier, like I said, his whole I don't want a people-pleasing government. He doesn't see it as people pleasing, obviously, but when he says, "Oh, when the government bans your," because I think I was like 13 when they did it, when they banned the right to the ability to smoke inside doors or in bars or buildings, however it's worded, he says you shouldn't be. Nobody should have to endure your smoking. And I think Ben Shapiro even said it. And they kind of brushed over it. But you will have your choice, your freedom to choose, not to go to the bars that allow the smoking. You don't have to go to the bar. You're not entitled to go to the bar. That's the point. So immediately when the government says, "Okay, we're going to step in. We're going to make rules for this business because there are people who don't like smoking, but they still want to go to the bar." That right there to me is the very definition of people pleasing. We're going to make it to where these people, they get their way, but then these people, they have to go by the way of life of these people. Do you get that? How that's people pleasing? Unnecessary people pleasing at that. Most of it is, but it's people pleasing still. So you go against your original statement at the beginning, which is you don't want people pleasing government. Let's see how he relates this to the gun debate.
You go back 50 years, you could get in your car and have a few drinks and drive around. And then Mothers Against Drink Driving, MAD I think they were called, rose up after a particularly heinous drink driving incident, and they affected real change. And now you can't do that. Now, there will be people who still think, "I want to have a few beers and have a drive." Okay, but you can't, actually, because you might kill people. And they have as much right to not be killed as you do to get in your car with a few drinks.
It's fascinating to go a little bit beneath the surface.
Okay, Ben Shapiro already, he addressed it in the way, but I'm still going to double state it because I want to. But he talked about how instead of when Piers Morgan used the drunk driving situation, you don't have the right to drink and drive your car. Okay, first, people, stop using cars in traffic. I've said this before, but please stop using cars in traffic. You're bad at analogies. Please stop. But anyway, what Piers Shapiro said was, you don't even have to even do that. Ban people from driving drunk or driving their car after some drinks. You can simply make a law that says reckless driving, endangerment of society can still be a law, and you don't even have to make the law directly at that, and it will cover more than just the drinking and the driving. Just like the gun situation, you already have laws on the books about what you can and can't do with guns, and you're not limiting people's right to have a firearm. I don't know, well, I kind of do, but people get on my nerves when they want to just gloss over and skip the whole point of how you can do this the proper way.
My 21, it's now 26, but my 21-year-old son at the time, 6'2", long hair and a beard, with his mate, he's the same. Took them to Gladstone's in Malibu for a lunch. And they wanted a non-alcoholic beer. And they got refused because they didn't have their ID on them. A non-alcoholic beer, because it has 0.001% alcohol in it. I didn't even know that. And when I asked them to explain why, they went, "Yeah, I'm afraid that's the problem. They can't prove they're 21, and you have to be 21 even to have a non-alcoholic beer." The same month up in Arizona, an 8-year-old girl went to a Bullets and Burgers, had her burger, then went to the range, was handed by a former Marine a load of firearms, loaded, fired them, eventually got handed an Uzi submachine gun, fired 2 bullets, then lost control and shot the instructor in the head and killed him. A terrible tragedy. She will never get over that, I'm sure. Her parents were videoing it on their phone, and you see them suddenly lose control of the phone. They won't get over it. The guy's dead. His family won't get over it.
Okay, so now Piers Morgan has went on this whole America is regulated more than anybody else except for the guns. Well, he didn't say that, but essentially that's how a person who likes guns hears it. Okay, here's the problem with that analogy. people who like guns tend to tell you regulation by the government on almost anything is overdone, and on top of that, done poorly. That's why you don't want the government regulating things. But people like Piers Morgan like it because it just agrees with his lifestyle. So let's just let it happen. Screw what you want. I mean, we'll let you have what you want, but kinda, as long as I feel safe about it. Oh God, and let's address this analogy he gave, which is the story, which is a girl who, a 21-year-old who can't prove that they're 21, but they're still freaking 21, couldn't buy a non-alcoholic beer, which again, overly regulated poorly, can't buy the beer, can't enjoy the beer, even though he's there with his father, which I think alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage, people leave that up to the parents to decide. Again, we don't even need the whole age limitations on stuff like that. Just let the parents decide. It's their kid. Let them decide. But then now he says, but this 8-year-old girl was allowed by the parent, let the parent decide, was handed guns that were too powerful. She lost control and shot someone. Okay, a tragedy. Absolutely. But when you look at the amount of people who allow their children to handle guns successfully without accident, and you look at that one example, this is the problem. This is the problem, Piers. That one is too many. No, it's not. No, it's not. Not for what you want to do. And that's the one of the biggest issues. Because you feel like you can just say one is enough and then that just ends it. But now you look at all these other tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of cases where it didn't happen. And you go, well, still, those millions of people still have to abide by the same rules because of this small percentage of a tragedy. Tragedies gonna happen. If you want to try to create a society where tragedies don't happen, then you literally have to confine people to their homes, and then they have to get permission to leave their homes, depending on what they're doing, to travel. If that's what you want to do, then, dude, I really don't know what to say at this point. And if you want to say, oh no, we understand, we just want to minimize tragedy, they're already minimized. They're already minimized. You want to say minimize more, what you got now, we're at the same point of over-regulation and regulating poorly by the government. We're already there. Stop. Oh God, Piers Morgan. Jeez, I don't get people like this. Because of the type of gun, he was able to get this many rounds off. Listen, if a gun is semi-automatic and you go to the range, perfectly outside range, because indoor ranges don't allow rapid fire. But if you sit there and practice, you'd realize that most of the time, if you practice enough, you can get off a lot of shots. A lot of shots. So saying, oh, because he got off this many shots with this particular gun, therefore now the gun should be bad. The problem, if we are saying one of the biggest reasons we even have the right to have it is because not even only just the God-given right of having a weapon to defend yourself, but even when you take the whole God-given rights out of it and you say, well, in America, we actually had to fight the government or a government or whatever. This is why we have this right. And then you say, but public safety, therefore we have to give up the right and let the government, who we think oversteps their bounds a lot, should be able to regulate the means that we would have to fight them if they overregulate it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Immediately you have to get rid of that ideology. You can't get past that part. You can't. You cannot get past that part.
The guy in Dayton, in Ohio recently, he was shot dead within 24 seconds of firing his first bullet. But because he had an AK-47, he was able to get off, I think, 41 rounds and hit 26 people, maybe more, of whom 9 died. And at that point, I'm like, okay, surely, if you're concerned about gun safety, and you fundamentally believe in the principle of regulation, you have it in every other part of your life, right? You have it in every part of your life. You also accept, I presume, machine guns are banned, right? Automatic weapons are banned, right? So you've accepted regulation on guns. So I say, well, why can't you go a step further now? Accept that the preferred weapon of choice of almost every one of these massacre shooters, they all use these rifles.
But that is the countervailing question.
Bingo. This is the problem. This is why I personally, not sure how many people agree, some, but I'm pretty sure we're like this big a percentage of the population. Pretty sure. But as he just said, oh, well, you accept the regulation over here, right? Oh, what's the regulation over there? What's the problem? This is why I don't want any regulation at all. Because people like him don't want to stop. Immediately, as soon as you go, I understand, so we'll meet you here with the gun control. All it takes is another shooting to go, okay, that wasn't enough, so let's just go here. And then here and here, and then here and here. I think we should just get rid of them. We got rid of knives over where I'm from, which, why are we always talking to Piers Morgan? It's not even in America. But anyway, as you see, he's even willing to get, and at one point he said, we're willing to get rid of knives. So, because it's a public, there is no end point. There's none. Eventually, if you look at the logic he's displayed over the course of this 10 minutes of talking, eventually you get to the point to where in his country, doing the same thing, you're even getting rid of knives. So no control. I'm not taking any step further. If you give me a vote, I'm voting to go backwards on gun control.
I found it extraordinary that after Sandy Hook, when 20 young first graders are literally blown to pieces in their classroom, that America, the #1 superpower in the world, was incapable of coming together and finding a unified response to try and prevent that happening again, of any kind. In Britain, we had a direct equivalent of Dunblane in Scotland. But there was a cultural reaction from Britain, from left and right, it was never political at all, that after 16 children were killed in Dunblane in Scotland in a similar attack by a lone gunman, that something fundamentally had to change. And we were very draconian, as you know. We banned almost all guns from civilian circulation. Interesting thing happened. For 5 years, gun crime ticked up a bit, actually. And then they said, okay, we need to make it more punitive. So now it's a 5-year mandatory prison sentence if you're caught with one of these guns. And ever since that moment, gun crime has gone down. We have other issues in Britain, like knife crime, very serious problems with knife crime. And the reaction from the British is the same. We've got to stop this. What can we do? Let's limit the amount of knives. Let's make it draconian to carry a knife in the street. In other words, our reaction to knife crime epidemic now is the same as our reaction to gun crime, which is we can't allow this to continue. Let's bring in laws to change it. And it's not left and right arguing about it. The three things.
This is the part where I just think to myself, people like Piers Morgan can't be this self-centered. He just said that, well, you know, of course, using the Sandy Hook thing, which in the first debate they had, Ben Shapiro accused him of standing on the graves of the children because, you know, there are plenty of other shootings that happen that qualify as mass shootings that aren't as emotionally driven as, you know, something like the Sandy Hook. Well, like, you know, I live in Detroit. I don't pay attention to the news much, but at least at some point we've had, you know, a time where people were just killing each other left and right well, not left and right, but like, you know, gang violence, stuff like that. They were going at each other with guns, killing each other. Sometimes kids would be, you know, shot to death and all that stuff. And actually, to sidestep real quick, there a few years ago, we have this lawyer here called Jeffrey Feiger. I'm not sure if he's national, but I know at least he's here. And this little girl got shot because the cops raided a house, and then they did something wrong. Well, they obviously did something wrong, but however they did it, they accidentally shot this little girl. And, you know, the whole lawsuit and all that stuff, but it's like, okay, when situations like that happen, Do people say take away the police guns because they make these mistakes and mistakes happen in police hands? But like I said, that's a sidestep, but bringing it back. He just said that, you know, over in my country, we, when something like that happened, what we did was we did what I want. So, how about it? Like that's what I hear when I hear that. You want gun control A. I'm saying I'm willing to go gun control double Z. And you said, well, you know, culturally, what the right thing to do, and you know, speaking this blissfully soft, everybody communed and came together, and it was very spiritual. And we just did what I wanted. Okay, great. Well, cool. Just hand me the petition. I'll sign it. You've won me over. I'm not going to include this clip, and this is actually going to be the last take that I have. He just mentioned the limit on magazines to 10 rounds, meaning, for those of you who are unfamiliar with gun terms, 10 bullets in each clip is essentially what he's saying. But he said that right after he said, I understand why you don't want to register because of government tyranny. Well, if I fear government tyranny, why would I want the government to limit my magazine size? If they get to send people to my door that hold 100 rounds, why would I not always also want 100 rounds? And that, again, that won't stop mass shootings. Even if you are talking about the Sandy Hook where they went into a school, those were little kids. Do you really, unless you're willing to say I can only own 1 or 2 magazines, but even still, that's still stupid because I can just steal somebody else's magazine. You want people to report their magazines being stolen? Like Colin Noir said in one of his videos, most people, I don't look at my magazines every day to go, are they all still here? No. So unless you're willing to do that, I can just have several 10-round magazines, because a lot of guns share the types of magazines. So I could essentially, let's say I just have 5. So I have 50 rounds. It was like, he said 21 died in Sandy Hook. Again, these are little kids. The minute I start going, let's hypothetically, I go and do the same thing. I step into a second grade, which is 7 years old, 7, 8 years old, and I just pop. There's a moment of shock, especially if I take the teacher out first. How much resistance do you think these 7-year-olds are going to give me while I'm shooting them? But hey, let's do something. Just to do something. That take is so stupid because you're just making yourself feel good, as opposed to actually try to find out something that actually works. But I guess because you don't just want to do anything, by default, you're the bad guy. Be right, not positive. I'm out.